this is kind of fun. They got a board game to teach computer security to noobs. So you play things like 0 days and then patch your system and so on. Kind of fun. But it's a free download, or you pay to get a pretty bright. So the jester decided to kill me. He's a career criminal. He's a political activist. Takes on websites. And he just decided to put up a Minecraft server because he has a lot of children imitating him. I know terrific people who become criminal hackers inspired by him. And then they go off and commit crimes. I finally convinced one of them to go straight. But, you know, this is just what I mean, this is very close to my field. I teach people hacking, but I teach them to obey the law and get a job. He teaches them to become criminals and save the world through denial of service. So he put up a Minecraft server so he can more effectively market his philosophy to children. Because he had a lot of children coming to his chat room, so he's going to be playing games with them online, convincing them to become political revolutionaries and go hack people. And I said that's a bad idea, so he said he will bury me. And another guy who's completely innocent named Packet Knife, who I just gave credit for pointing out to me the jester's plan. Anyway, so then he deleted this, and I discovered a fun fact. If you want to report a death threat to the Twitter authorities, which is a wise thing to do, you can't. You're host. I tried. In the first place, you have to check a box that says, we're going to tell the person you're complaining about everything you said about them. I said, well, thanks a lot. That's really going to help. And the next thing is, even if you agree to that, you still can't, because you can only refer to the live tweet on the system. And he deleted the tweet, so you cannot complain about it. Anyway, so it's fun thing. I don't think he's really going to kill me. He is ex-military. I expected his followers to make death threats against me about a year ago. And they got close, but they didn't quite do it. His followers are sort of crazed ex-military. He's definitely crazed ex-military. But I don't think he's liable to hunt down someone physically, but you never know. Yeah.
So because you convinced some guy to go straight, he got upset?
No, he didn't care about that. No, because I said that he was wrong to set up this system to target children. I said, you know, I don't even teach ethical hacking to high school students. I tried it. In my opinion, they were not mature enough. And they really would do something stupid like hack somebody's Facebook, and I don't want that happening. And he's trying to attract children to come play this game with him so he can explain to them his philosophy. And his followers immediately assumed that I was saying he was going to teach them hacking attacks that would put them in danger. I said, I don't even care about the hacking attacks. He shouldn't be a role model. They're going to think he's a great guy and want to be like him, and he's a bloody career criminal. But he thinks he's saving the world, so it's right that he's a criminal and they should just change the laws to make what he does right. So anyway, this is the worst. I'm getting old enough, I understand the political stuff I used to think was so cynical. There's nothing worse than a do-gooder. I mean, people that just want money, you can handle them. These nuts that think they're saving the world are just crazy. It's very hard to deal with them. Anyway, evasion. New jailbreak for the iPhone is out, and apparently this one's going to last for several more weeks. These things usually only last about a week before Apple patches them. This one is expected to last for several more weeks. So, but of course, after Apple patches it, then the whole jailbreaking drama happens where you have to go back to an old version of the OS in order to jailbreak. And that's what the sense in which jailbreaking makes you less secure. But it does, of course, let you do things Apple doesn't approve of. You could just get an Android, though. Anyway.
There's a new patch.
Yeah, they're working on
this
patches.
morning and last night.
Oh, there's a new patch?
I think.
Oh,
I forget which device I picked up this morning.
Yeah.
6.0, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, I think.
I still was out of date for other reasons. I just didn't want to lose my Google Maps. But anyway, anyway, so this is kind of fun. These guys figured out how to bypass Google two-factor authentication. It's really very simple. If you have an Android device, they have a persistent cookie of some sort that lets them go in without your password, and even if you change your password, it doesn't make them re-log in. So for 7 months, it was possible to bypass Google two-factor authentication by just getting hold of an Android device that was already logged into that account. Apparently, this has been fixed to some extent now. Although I am highly skeptical, because one of the big problems with Android is that nobody ever updates their stuff. They did a survey, and they found the number of people actually running the latest version of Android is like 1/2%. Because carriers always block the updates, because Google keeps giving you stuff for free that your carrier wants to charge you for it. So most carriers choose not to deliver the updates. Most people are using very out-of-date versions of Android, and that is really bad. Out-of-date OSs are, of course, vulnerable, and Androids are vulnerable to a lot of exploits. Androids have brought viruses to Linux, of course. So the guys that took all the did all the denial of service attacks against the bank, I hear a lot of people screaming and yelling about these guys saying contradictory things. These are people say this is really a military operation from one of the Islamic nations And it's just pretending to be about this video, but it sure seems to honestly be about video. They claim it's about this one video that insults Muslims on YouTube. And they took down, they had a huge denial of service attack against US banks for about a month, and they took it down when Google did something like restrict that video so it couldn't be seen in certain countries. They said, okay, we're going to give you a couple weeks off, and we're going to start again until you destroy all copies of that video on the internet.
Good luck.
Well, if you take it off YouTube, actually, first they take all copies on the internet, then later on they say you just want to take it off YouTube, and you could do that. I don't think they should, but anyway, they are going to start the DOS attacks again, so whether this really is what it claims to be, just a bunch of people that really want to see that video down, or it's some kind of cover for some other operation, it apparently is going to start up again. And there were several talks at Baythread about this, the techniques you use to block these attacks. By the way, how many people went to B-Sides? Saw a few of you. All right, well I have a sheet up here, just put your name before you go, and I don't know how many days you went, it's worth extra credit. I thought B-Sides was pretty good. We managed to have a little drama at the end. Violet Blue wanted to give some talk about sex, and they canceled it because someone complained about it. And where would hackers be without their drama? So, I took a position that's turning out to be somewhat controversial. I said, you know, I don't know why we had to talk about sex there anyway. I thought this never should.
Why would that ever even be approved?
That's right. Well, then a bunch of people say it's not really just a security conference. It's for all underground opinions about everything. So, well, I don't know.
Besides
They were just like,
Yeah.
when I went last night, they were just getting drunk. You know?
They do that a lot, yes. They do just get completely drunk and follow themselves and stuff. It's,
Yeah.
I usually go find something else to do by about that point. You know,
Yeah.
So there is another whole side to this culture, which is valued by some of them, although not by me. So anyway, so a certain number of sort of stodgy, boring old security guys like me keep saying, who cares about your stupid sex and drugs? And other people say, sex, drugs, yeah, rah, rah, rah. So anyway, we'll see what happens. Probably a matter of how old you are, I suppose. All right, so we got down to this stuff before. Okay, IPsec is the most secure way to encrypt your stuff for VPN over the internet. And it has two modes, transport mode and tunnel mode. Transport mode encrypts only the payload. Tunnel mode encapsulates the entire packet in another packet and encrypts the whole thing. The difference here, when I first heard about this, I thought this was stupid. The payload is the only thing that matters. The payload is the only thing that has stuff like your passwords and your emails in it. But concealing the address part might seem like a good thing because otherwise people can find out the call register information. And this is usually what the cops want with the search warrant. They don't even want to hear your phone calls. They just want to know who you called, when, and for how long. That's all. That's called the call register. And you can get that with a easy-to-get court order. And that is usually all anybody needs because they don't really need to hear your conversation. They just need to know when you called somebody, how long you talked. And that's why you often hear, like the Watergate hearings and everything else, so you talked to this guy this date, therefore your claim that we didn't know about this important event is false. And so concealing your address information would seem to be an important part of security, but the thing I really don't get is even if you conceal your address information, you still have to deliver the package. So there's an address in plain text in the front of the packet, and you can't do anything about that unless you go through the Tor network or something. There's still a record of how many total megabytes you sent from this address to that address. But if what you're going to is some kind of proxy which then forwards it further, then you may have security. Anyway, you do have both modes available in your IPsec security. And it authenticates clients with Internet Key Exchange over UDP port 500 and creates these things called security associations, which are sort of like the higher level version of the TCP handshake, where you SYN, SYN, ACK, and now you're ready to change data. You do a more complicated process here of exchanging a key, and then you're ready to transmit encrypted information back and forth between the objects. So the authentication header is the technique that gives you authentication and integrity, but it doesn't give you confidentiality. ESP is what that's encapsulating security payload. That's what gives you encryption.
And that's just the difference in encrypting the payload or not, and not the rest.
Yes, that's transport and tunnel. But this is a separate choice. So there really are poor combinations. Yeah. All right. Anyway, L2TP is what's usually used to deliver this stuff over the internet. You use L2TP to transport the packets over the internet. You use IPsec to encrypt the packets, and that is considered the current best way to make a VPN. As far as anybody can tell, that is really high-grade security. Nobody's going to get in there without knowledge of the key. Of course, all that happens when you make good security is people will just come in another way. I mean, they could just sneak a camera in your room and look at your screen. They will find out what you're typing. I mean, there's no perfect security, but you can make the encryption part so good that nobody is going to get in there by stealing the packets off the wire. They're going to have to find some other way to steal your secrets. All right, so NAT, network address translation, changes the IP address on the packets. And one problem is IPsec needs that address, so it will break, network address translation breaks IPsec. So there's a special kind of NAT traversal protocol used for that. You could also use another kind of tunnel to deliver your IPsec. It is an issue though. So there are different kinds of VPNs out there. Here's one common type you might have at a company. Like we might have one here. I don't know if we do. I know we have a dedicated fiber link connecting the campuses. I don't think we encrypt it. But you could have the main campus and some kind of branch campus, and you could connect just over the internet with a VPN tunnel. Right from the, and you put a server right on the network and a server right on this network, and everybody here could just navigate and use resources over there, and they wouldn't even know they're passing through an encrypted tunnel. It would be a virtual point-to-point link. This is one easy kind of VPN, useful for companies, and users don't have to have a client or know a password or anything, just the devices on the network are sending your traffic through a tunnel to get to the other end. So that's nice. But of course what most people want is to go to a hotel and connect to work, and then you need a client here because people are moving. All right, so if you do let people remotely go to hotels and Starbucks and everything and log into work from there, then you have the issue of how do you authenticate so you know you're letting in the real employees and not weird hackers sneaking in. So this is called remote access services in Microsoft, and there are different ways to authenticate. Sometimes you even use PAT, plain text authentication protocol, but that's a terrible idea. Most of the time they figured out they don't want to just send plain text passwords over the wire, so Microsoft started with CHAP. CHAP was their challenge handshake protocol. You would send a random byte from the server saying, here's your challenge, add this random stuff to your password, hash that, and send me the result. And so the thing that went over the wire was computed from your password, but it was not easily reversed to steal your password off the wire. It turns out that Microsoft did a pretty bad job of handling the math on this, and it's easily broken, which Bruce Schneier proved 10 or 12 years ago. MS Chat version 2 was Microsoft's update, which made it more secure, but it also fell. And Moxie Marlinspike just published a tool about 6 months ago that can break through these 100% of the time. A cloud service, server-to-cloud computers can brute force the whole key space in, I think, one day. I think he charges 50 or 100 bucks for each one of those. He's paid some money, he will run it through his machine, and out comes the decrypted stuff, so that's not very good. You can use other kinds of authentication methods to make it stronger, like Extensible authentication protocol. Anyway, once you've done that, you're going to connect to a server at work. Your password or some kind of authentication information is passing over the wire to authenticate who you are. And then there's a server that performs the authentication at the other end that has a list of all the credentials and a list of all the users and what they're allowed to do. And these are the AAA servers that do authentication, access, and accounting. They verify who you are, limit what you're allowed to do to whatever that person is supposed to do, and keep track of what you did with a log, which was originally used to bill you by the hour, but it's used for security purposes now. We have a record of what everybody did, so that if somebody does somehow defeat this, like they steal a laptop and connect to the company network, we can go back and say, all right, what did that guy do on the network? Try to figure out what damage they've done. So Radius was the earlier one. As you can tell just from the name, originally intended for dial-in users. Now, of course, you use it over the internet over broadband connections. And it encrypts the passwords. TakeAx Plus is the more modern replacement for Radius, used by Cisco devices. And it encrypts the entire negotiation progress. And it's considered more secure than Radius, although there's nothing terribly wrong with Radius. Both of these are pretty fine. All right. Now, another issue you might have is people might take their laptop home and surf the internet and get infected with malware, and then connect remotely to the company network and infect everybody up here with viruses. Or have keyloggers and stuff on their home machine that are stealing their passwords in their company work. So one way to prevent this is network access control. Some colleges have this, and we considered it here. Like I told you about a year ago when there was a fake scare on campus where we thought all the machines were infected with viruses because of our crazy CTO. There was discussion of what we should do about it, and this is one possible thing to do. Some colleges do this. They have network access control. You cannot connect to the network without first installing a client on your machine, which has to send a health report to the server. And the server will say, do you have the latest patches, the latest updates, this particular brand of antivirus, and is it up to date? If you don't have all that, you cannot get to the network. Instead, we'll just send you to some remediation server where you can download all that stuff, and install all that stuff, and only after you prove that you've installed all that and it's running, can you connect to the network. And I came across this because people would contact me on the internet to try to get help, because if you go to a college like that and you have an Apple, or you use Linux, you're hosed, because you will never be able to prove that you put on your latest Microsoft patch and you're running a Microsoft antivirus. So what you have to do is download a hacking tool to make fake health reports to pretend to be a Windows machine that has done all that in order to get on the network. And there are tools for this purpose. And by the way, the health reports are not terribly encrypted or secure or anything, so you could, if you wanted to, put it on your Windows machine and lie to them and pretend to have all the updates when you don't. But anyway, that's the game. That's why this turns out to be a lot of work for everybody. But then you could say, we have reason to believe that even the network where we let students bring their laptops in from home is relatively free from viruses. This is not necessary here, and we don't do it. It would just be a waste of money. The total amount of viruses brought in by students is small enough that it's not impeding instruction. But it took a lot of committee meetings and delegate people to reach that conclusion. But anyway, if you choose to do that, that's network access control. People have to prove they meet your security protocols before they can even join the network. And in a high security establishment, it can be quite justified. You don't want anybody bringing in a defective machine. So here's the Microsoft image of this. Microsoft does this with a thing called a quarantine server. So the VPN people are coming in to the remote access server. Then their signal goes to the Radius server, which consults Active Directory for their credentials. And then they get to network resources if they're approved. If they fail the health test, they're sent down here to the quarantine network. They can reach only certain resources. And on you go. All right.
And that refers to
What's that?
A packet of data that like, would then get sent to be quarantined before it accesses the network.
Which?
Well, like what gets quarantined essentially?
Yes.
A packet of data.
No, the user. The user cannot access any other resources. See, there are two things. Now, this thing here looks to me like, this is really what I call DMZ. But the point is, if you do have network access control, then what happens is, first you have to prove that you are a legitimate user or you don't get on well.
Right.
And even if you are a legitimate user, you have to prove you're healthy to get over to the real stuff like the file server. Otherwise, it puts you down here and you only get certain access.
I see.
It is, of course, only steering your packets, but it is your access to the network. So you try to open the web design page to change the website, and you can't until you pass the health test. And you can't even do that until you pass the authentication test to prove you really are a member of the company and you're authorized to do this. All right. So there's another kind of network access control, probably appropriate for a home environment. This is what we used to use at the college a couple of years ago. Wireless networks, people have a problem. You put up a wireless network and you'll know your neighbors connect to your wireless connection and they start using up all your bandwidth, downloading BitTorrent or whatever. And you want to kick them off. Yeah?
That's why you always have to lock up your security to... Speaking of which, I wonder what security is easier to WPA2?
Well, the best is WPA2. That will most efficiently keep strangers off, but it will also slow down your network because your router has to do a lot of work encrypting the packets. So there are alternatives. And one thing a lot of people like is MAC address filtering, which is much weaker, but it doesn't slow down your router as much.
No, I was referring to the college here.
The college, what we used to use, well, now we use WPA2, but everyone knows the key, and you actually have to go in and sign in with your W number and your birthday. That's our current system. And you can't even change it anymore. It's always just your birthday, because we got tired of paying for the help desk people that handle password changes. Before that, though, we used MAC addresses like this. Now, the MAC address is, of course, on every device. You know your Net Plus, hopefully. If you open up a command prompt, and do ipconfig or ifconfig on the Mac, you will find your MAC address. Now, the idea is your MAC address is impressed in the firmware of your network card, and therefore is a unique identifier of your machine. But the problem is it's trivial to change in software. You can just go into Device Manager and Properties of your NIC on a Windows machine. For most NICs, on a Linux machine, you can just use an ifconfig command to change your MAC address. Because even though there is a MAC address in the firmware of the card, it's only used once during boot up to load it in a register, which is it's a temporary holding place that's used for all network communication. You can overwrite that. So after you boot up, you just replace the MAC address, and that's what's really used. So you can spoof them. I remember when we had this old system here, I made a MAC address AAA, BB, 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 and I told all my advanced hackers, and all of us just used that MAC address everywhere. Because at that time, not only did you have to give your MAC address to register, but you could only have 2. And I had like 7 computers, and I said, what's the problem? I'm just going to change all the MAC addresses to be the same on all my computers, and all my students changed it to be the same too. And we discovered the fun fact that you can actually have many machines with the same MAC address connected to the network. If they're in different rooms, it will never know. And anyway, and it was about a year before somebody finally busted me because that particular MAC address is actually invalid. You can't have an A as the first character. I didn't know that. There's a certain bit that has to be 0 in the first character. So he said, you're an evil hacker, you're spoofing your MAC address. And I said, well, yes, I'm spoofing my own MAC address. Now, how is it a crime for me to impersonate myself? They said, what are you doing? So the guy was yelling at me, he came and took my course. And he said, well, all right. Anyway, so this is a pretty weak security measure because all you have to do is run Wireshark in promiscuous mode where other people using wireless internet steal their packets and see their MAC address. Then you just go to another room, or if you're nasty, you kick them off with the Denial of Services Act, and you take their MAC address and use that. Then you're on the network. Your neighbor can do this too at home. But of course, hopefully your neighbor's not a very advanced hacker. You're going to have real trouble keeping it off your network. If they're just trying to find it and click on it and get in, MAC address filtering will keep casual neighbors from using your router. Another thing that happens, by the way, which I think would be pretty good to defend you in court of internet crimes, I've had several students tell me that they bought a Linksys router, turned it on, went home, used it, and then they noticed like weeks later that their Linksys router was actually not turned on. Somebody unplugged it. They didn't know they were connecting through their neighbor's Linksys router with the same name, and you don't even know. This certainly does happen a lot. You know, they all have the same name. People don't turn on the password. How do you really know? You don't really care. You're on the internet. Anyway, so that's the game there. But that's MAC address filtering, which is one security measure. And on wired networks, it's also common in 802.1x. They call it sticky ports in Cisco, where the first time you plug in a cable, it remembers the MAC address of that device, and if any other device tries to plug in that port, it will reject it. And that's probably a little bit better, because it might not be easy for you to get the MAC address of that device. Like if one of these machines was broken, and we sent it off to be repaired, and you came in and plugged in your laptop, you wouldn't have any way to find the MAC address of that broken device that's not here. So even if you found an empty port to plug into, it wouldn't take your computer and you would have no easy way to spoof the correct MAC address to get on. Anyway, but in wireless networks it's easy because you can steal addresses from people that are actively using the network, and you can't encrypt or hide the MAC addresses at all. They're required to deliver the traffic. So you can always sniff them. Anyway, let's do a few eye-clicker questions. Which IPsec mode uses no encryption? All right, that's AH, authentication header. Well, all over the place, goodness. Let me go back to it. The authentication header provides authentication but no confidentiality. All the others use encryption. Let me go back to that stuff. I see random numbers there, so. Okay, AH gives you authentication and integrity. It has an authentication protocol and it has a hash value, but it doesn't provide any encryption. It doesn't provide any confidentiality. ESP does. And both of the other modes do encrypt the payload. Transport encrypts the payload, and tunnel encrypts the payload and the packet. But the AH by itself does not give any encryption at all. So which one encrypts only payload? All right, that is transport mode. Yep, transport mode encrypts only the payload. All right. So if you use private addresses, what do you have to add to your IPsec? You must add NAT traversal. NAT is one way to do it. Cisco, what protocol do they use for their VPNs? JTAX Plus. You know. All right, which one of these will make sure that all your client machines are using antivirus? All right, that's network access control. We want to detect malicious activity after it occurs. Which one of these will tell you? And that's, of course, an IDS that detects systems. A sniffer will detect it in progress, but you have to hunt. Part of an IDS is it tells you what was malicious, and it keeps a log so you can look and ask a question like how many times did people log in after hours, how many times did people download files from the forbidden website in the last time. Your IDS will have a log that lets you do that. But it only tells you after it happens, like antivirus. All right, let's see. How about 4? You're using a network intrusion detection system, and it is updated frequently by the vendor. So what kind of NIDS is that? But that is signature-based. That's why it has to download those signatures all the time, like antivirus. The alternative is anomaly-based, which relies on somehow knowing what normal traffic is and detecting deviations from normal traffic, which is, by the way, pretty miserable, doesn't work very well. Signature-based is the most popular technique because it doesn't waste your time on false positives. Find something bad, it's usually really bad. Anyway, all right. How about this? 6. You're going to divert attacks to worthless resources. All right, that's a honeypot. Good, people remember that. That's an easy name to remember. My roommate used to have an automatic message system on his phone, and all his family would keep calling and leaving messages, and he never listened to it. And I told him, that's honeypot. You're just irritating people. They think they're communicating with you, and they're not. Anyway, so, all right, let's do number 7 here. An IPS. What's an IPS for? 25. All right, prevents attacks in progress. That's stops attacks in progress, B. It can't stop attackers from attacking. The only thing that would do that would be something like catching them and locking them in prison. Yeah.
I had a question that came up after last week about IPS and active IDS.
Yeah.
So
They're the same thing.
I understand. Are they generally the same thing?
Yeah, yeah. An active IDS, you could also call it an IPS, and some people even call them IDPS, Intrusion Detection and Prevention System.
Okay.
They're all mean the same thing.
Because in the book it's kind of saying that an IPS is outside the firewall and in line with the traffic, and I didn't know if there was a real...
That's true. There is a geometrical difference, and that's actually worth mentioning. If you have so you have your network down here of things you're protecting. Your IPS has to actually be directly in line with all your traffic, and therefore a single point of failure, because it has to be able to stop the traffic. Your IDS is typically over here on the side, just sniffing the packets out of the flow, recording them all.
But could you put your active IDS
On the side,
in the same place as the IPS?
You could put it here. You could put your passive IDS here too, although it would be a weird thing to do. You could also put your active IDS, your IPS over here, and it would then have to have control of a firewall over here. But ultimately, it has to control a device that's in line if it's going to block the attack. You're putting up 802.11n, and you want strong security, so what should you use? That's a fair question. All right, and obviously you want WPA2 off of that list. No web, WPA2. Now, it would be interesting to talk about the other choices here. For example, there's nothing wrong with FTPS, and there's nothing wrong with SSL, but they are not general purpose protocols. They don't do, these both will protect certain kinds of traffic, but not all the traffic. If you want to protect all the traffic, you've got to encrypt all the wireless signals, and that's what these will do. And of the two, WPA does a much better job than web. All right.
I have a question about that. Does WPA2 affect the way Wireshark would pick up traffic on your network?
Yes, it does. In fact, one thing that you can, if you sniff your own traffic, it won't affect anything at all. But if you sniff somebody else's traffic on a WPA2 network, you won't be able to open it because you don't have the key.
So you don't see anything?
Well, you'll see encrypted junk. There are two keys used in WPA, actually. There's one for broadcast packets, which everybody has, and there's another for point-to-point unicast packets, which you don't have. There is a way to catch the key off the wire and decode someone else's packets in WPA2 in Wireshark. I've never figured out how to do it. I've seen lots of videos of people showing it. It isn't possible to do, but it's quite difficult. I think if you have the whole sequence of all the packets, including the original handshake, it's possible under certain conditions to do it. Yeah?
There's a pin on a lot of routers that if you put the pin in, it'll just spit out the WPA2 password.
Oh, really? Physically? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like if you take the case off and feel around it.
There's a program called Reaver, which will just...
Oh, no.
pin that- pin that-
Oh, no, that's different. That's different. I know how that works. That's Wi-Fi protected setup. And that is a new feature to make WPA easier to use that encodes every WPA key as an 8-digit number. And there are only 10,500 possible numbers. I've read Reaver. I was going to make it a homework project, but it's really annoying. It takes 19 hours, and the router crashes over and over. So you wouldn't thank me for giving you that homework project. But it does trash security. That's why, if you want a secure router in the real world, you should get one that is about 4 years old. Because you've got to get one before they started ruining security by adding the WPS to them. And you can't even take it out once it's in. There should be a bunch of updates coming out to turn off WPS or patch it, but I haven't heard much news about that. But about a year ago, Reaver came out, and there's even another successor of Reaver, showing that the current routers have this convenience feature which ruins the security of WPA and WPA2. It's not good.
So you can't, if you get a bottom router, you can't use WPA2 without the WPS?
Well, that is an interesting question. Now, some of them give you an option to turn it off, but some of them, the Cisco routers in particular, if you do turn off the WPS, you can't use it, but the attack keeps working. So even if they give you an option to turn it off, you can't trust it. So it would be nice And by the way, there is one secure thing you could do though, which is brought by a student last night. You could blow away the firmware and put on Linux. If you put on Tomato or OpenWRT, there's no WPS in there at all. They never bothered to implement it in the open source implementations, and I'm sure they never will. They ignored it completely, which is wise, just like open source ignored ActiveX. There's this new thing that sounds pretty bogus, just ignore it, and after a few years everybody wishes they'd never done it anyway. So that's one possibility if you want to be secure. Of course, home routers, I should mention, Reaver is not a practical attack. Home routers cannot be broken into with Reaver because they are so badly built that they will just crash. I tried it. They crash, you try about 10 keys and they crash. So unless you're going to stand there and reboot your router 1,000 times without suspecting that somebody is attacking you, you can't get in with Reaver because you really have to try 10,000 keys and the damn thing crashes every few keys. You have to pay $150 to get a router strong enough to stay up long enough to be broken into this way. Anyway, and by the way, a lot of firmware manufacturers have implemented non-standard protections against this. Many of them will delay you for 5 minutes if you guess 5 or 10 keys incorrectly or something. And that slows Reaver way down. So that's not part of the standards, but many manufacturers on their own figured out that key looks kind of short, this looks kind of bogus. It's an 8-digit key, and that doesn't seem wise enough. So, all right, these are good points. So, if you want centralized authentication for a wireless network, which one of these will give you that? Number 13. All right, and Radius is the AAA server for that thing. So let's do 14, this looks good. What is the best solution to let only certain people use your wireless network? So the only thing that will do it on this list is MAC filtering. MAC filtering lets in only the layer 2 addresses that you approve. Content filtering, by the way, is blocking like porn and violence and stuff. Never address translation, just changes the address, and network intrusion prevention system we talked about plenty. But the only one that will actually limit your traffic to authorized users on the list is MAC filtering. It's not extremely powerful at preventing unauthorized users, but it will stop the ones that don't know how to spoof a MAC address. Yeah?
What if it was combined with WPA2? I mean, it's
Much better.
Because you can't do a man in the middle, right?
Well, WPA2 is not particularly subject to man in the middle either. WPA2 alone is very strong, and it's your strongest technique to keep strangers off your network, but you could also combine it with MAC address filtering, and that would, in principle, be stronger.
But the point of MAC filtering too would also be to increase your speed.
Well,
if you weren't using WPA2, so
yeah, that's
might
true.
kind of lower
Yeah,
it
if you
down
don't want
by-
to use WPA2 because you don't like the key cut, then you could use MAC filtering. Yeah, that's right. They're both, yeah, MAC filtering is just a weaker measure, but it's easier for the router to do, of course. And all it has to do is check to see if the MAC address is right before you connect. A lot of people use MAC filtering, but it's not very strong. What do you do to prevent people from discovering your wireless access point? 16. You disable the broadcast, you've got it. Then your network does not announce its presence anymore, which irritates your legitimate users and makes it very difficult for them to roam from one room to another. But it does also mean that casual users will not find you on the list and click on you and connect to it. All right. There's different ways to authenticate people on your network with the Extensible Authentication protocol. Cisco invented this thing called LEAP, which was an attempt to improve over web. And it turned out to be subject to an offline dictionary attack. Joshua Wright wrote a hacking tool to crack LEAP, and Cisco got really mad and published this statement about him that he is making the world worse by publishing these tools. And this is sort of what began the dance of ethical hackers and companies shooting at each other. The ethical hackers point out problems in companies, and the companies usually react with anger and denial, and now they've pretty much gotten over it. Most companies now sponsor hacking conferences, give you financial prizes for telling you about problems. They've given up hating you for pointing out their flaws, and have learned that you should cooperate and love the people that tell you about the flaws and don't just sell them to the Russian mob and get everybody hacked. Anyway, so Protect LEAP encapsulates EAP in a TLS channel. Remember, TLS is the later version of SSL, Secure Sockets Layer. This requires a certificate authority, and therefore you have to pay for a certificate, but it does make you much more secure. There's also wireless transport layer security available. And by the way, some portable devices prefer to use elliptic cryptography mathematics instead of multiplying by prime numbers because it is more power economical. It's another version of having a private key and a public key with a different kind of math, which probably should have become the standard, but it just wasn't around when the standard was set long ago to be this this current system where you multiply by prime numbers to encrypt your packets. Both of them are perfectly fine, but this one requires less computational steps to implement. So other things you might want to do on your router, of course, change the default password. If you leave the default administrator password, that's bad. MAC filtering we talked about. Maybe you can just you can disable the SSID broadcasts, and then you won't appear in this list. Anybody can still sniff your packets with Wireshark and find if anybody's using the network and find out that it's there, but at least you're not right there openly inviting people to connect. You can change the default SSID, so instead of saying LinkSys, it says something else. That's a good idea because there are attacks specific to certain brands of routers, quite a few of them. There's a fun contest, the router hacking contest, that had attacks that would take over each brand and model of router. And if you conceal the brand and model of your router, it helps. Although just looking at its MAC address is often enough to tell you what it is anyway. But you can change that too. So we war drive, and we drive through San Francisco and find out how secure all the routers we can reach in San Francisco are. And we've been doing this for quite a while, so we have quite an accumulation of results. Here's the last several years. When we started in 2008, only 20% of networks were using WPA. Most of them were using WEP or Open. And every semester it got better until the most recent one in November 2012. It was 57 plus 13, 60 or 70% of all the networks are now using WPA or WPA2. Only a little bit of people using WEP and the open ones. The only people that are completely stupid are the ones in red. I mean, there's no excuse for WEP. WEP just irritates your good people and doesn't keep the bad people out. There are reasons you might want to be open. You might just be a coffee house and want to let everybody in. That's not bad. And also, a lot of these open ones, like the City College one, just lead to some login page further. So you really have to prove something later. But if you want to keep people out, you should be green. And if you want to let everybody in, you should be blue. There is no point to being red. And that is happening. So either people are getting smarter, which I doubt, or more likely they're just buying new routers. And the new equipment is set up less stupidly. For a long time, the Yahoo routers, the 2 wires, were WEP by default. Now those things are mostly broken and replaced by modern routers that are not WEP by default. I think that's what you're really seeing here. But anyway, it's kind of fun. We also did a few of them in Texas. This is legal, by the way. There's a guy in town trying to say I'm wrong for doing this. It's illegal because he doesn't understand what happened to Google. Google war drove the whole world, and they didn't just record this kind of information. They recorded the packets, so they actually had people's passwords and stuff, and that might be illegal. That led to a huge lawsuit. That might be legal anyway, but that's pushing the line. It's not pushing the line to just say how secure the network is and keep going. And so anyway, the whole world is doing this, by the way, and that's why I had Wiggle up here. There's Wiggle, the wireless internet geographic logging engine. If you download their software, it records not only the name of the access point, but the GPS coordinates, but it doesn't record the encryption, so it's not any good for the kind of war driving I do. But here's the area around the college, and there's all the access points around the college. And if you zoom in enough, it gives you the name of every one. So I go down to a street here, and there we are, there they come. LinkSys, NIST, Office, Netgear. People are just driving around with their cell phones and everything, contributing to this. It's crowdsourced. The whole world is densely mapped.
And that's anything that's broadcast.
Yes.
Broadcast.
Well, I don't know what happens with their software. You can write software that picks up the others too, but they probably didn't, I would think. Google is also doing the same thing, and another company called Skyhook. They're mapping the whole world, and they're using it to locate you. When you turn on your locate your iPad, it says, please turn on the Wi-Fi so I can locate you better, because the GPS has, I think, 50 meters of randomness, which is added artificially by design because they use it to target cruise missiles, and they do not want civilians having access to that high-quality data, so they deliberately add errors to the GPS signals for civilian devices. But you can fix it by seeing how strong the access points are near you if you have mapped where all the access points in the world are, and Google has, and several people have. They have databases of all the access points. And by the way, you can search by MAC address on here. So if you see somebody in class and you want to know where they live, and they turn on a Mac, every time a Mac boots up, or an iPhone, it sends out the last 5 MAC addresses of the router out, trying to contact a known router. You can record them with Wireshark, and you can search through here and find out where they live. And this technique has been used to catch criminals. There are criminals that actually go, take a plane somewhere else, kill somebody, come back and say, I never left. But when they go and they have a computer and they cleaned all the traces out of their computer, but when you look at the log of the wireless access connections, there's an access connection to a MAC address over there. So war driving is something you do to find access points on a network. If you want to know if people are using wireless access points other than what they should be. Yeah.
When you say rogue access points, do you mean like open source access points?
No, I mean ones that are not authorized by the company. Like City College has wireless, and you could buy your own home router, put it in your office, and then it wouldn't be complying with the security policy. It might not be encrypted, you know. So people often do, and companies always have to keep stopping it, because you usually don't want everybody doing that, because then someone in the parking lot could just come right in the network through your rogue access point. Yeah, you got a question right there?
Yeah. How long is this information around?
Forever. Anything on Google is pretty much there forever. And they do update it. Google is driving these cars all over the place. In fact, they're driving themselves constantly. All these self-driving robot cars constantly going around taking fresh pictures. And the same cars that record the pictures of everything in Street View are recording the Wi-Fi signals. And as far as I know, there's no time machine to go back, although maybe after it's been around for a few years, that would be kind of fun. Look at the last 5 years of what's happened in your neighborhood. But as far as I know, nobody does that. But there are many companies doing it. Microsoft has their version of Street View. Google does. And that's legal in America. In other countries, this is not illegal. In Japan, they got in a world of trouble. When they tried driving down the street with Google and just taking a picture of everybody's house from the outside, the people were outraged and they threw them out of the country. You can't do that here. That totally violates our concept of privacy. But it does not violate American privacy laws. If you do something out on the street, and if anybody standing in the street can see it, you have no expectation of privacy. In America, it's legal to just take pictures out there. If you want to keep it private, you have to be in your house, behind a fence, something like that. But other countries don't see it that way. Anyway, so rogue access points are just ones you put up that are not approved by the management. Evil twins are access points that pretend to be the official company website when they aren't. This is a great attack. I could put up a router here, call it CCSF Wireless, and if all the people in this room, their laptops would connect to it because it seems to be a stronger signal than the other CCSF Wireless, and even if it has no encryption turned on, and the real CCSF Wireless has encryption, Windows machines will silently connect to it without telling you, and you'll continue to surf the internet, and your traffic is now not encrypted and passing through my device. And you can do this at a coffee house. It's a common trick. You can just have another second access point card in your machine, turn up the power, claim to be Starbucks, everybody associated with you, you're going through them, and you can sniff their traffic. It's one of the more common ways to steal traffic, and that's what the Wi-Fi Pineapple does. It's a Hack5 tool, you see it around in hacking cons. Anyway, all right, so you can interfere with Wi-Fi. If you just turn on a noisy motor or something, you can block it. There are disassociation frames you can emit too. Disassociation frames are not authenticated in any way. So you can send them out and everybody in your network will get kicked off, everyone within line of sight will be kicked off the Wi-Fi network, and there's nothing you can do to stop it, and there's no way to find out who's doing it either. It doesn't have your address in the packets. It's pretty annoying. It's a failure of the Wi-Fi protocol. Starbucks does protect their customers. If you run a network scan at Starbucks, you will not find anyone else in your local area network. Every customer is put in their own VLAN. Your network contains just you and the router. But your traffic is unencrypted, so you can just directly pick up the radio signals to people next to you. But you cannot attack them through the Starbucks network. And that they call it isolation mode. It's on quite a few routers. Ad hoc mode, normally you use infrastructure mode, where there's a router going to the internet, you join it and get internet access, but you can also just connect two wireless devices to each other without the internet, without a router. That's like crossover cable. That's ad hoc mode. You can have as many of those as you want, and they can just exchange data locally, which you might do to synchronize a portable device with a computer. And Bluetooth gives you these short-range connections, intended to only go 10 meters, typically from a device in your backpack up to your ear or something. These, in principle, can be secured by the PIN number, and they can even be encrypted, but most of them have the encryption turned off and have the PIN set to 0000, and you can't change it. The earpieces anyway, because they figure anybody standing near you can hear your phone call anyway, so you're basically broadcasting over unencrypted radio in addition. Blue snarfing is stealing Bluetooth data, and blue jacking is inserting Bluetooth data into a stream. Both attacks are possible, although not very commonly done because there isn't very much in the way of open source tools that can actually do this. Bluetooth is actually very complicated. It has a complicated jumping back and forth between 81 channels, and even getting Wireshark to sniff Bluetooth isn't really working yet. At least it wasn't at the last DEF CON. I went to the talk about it and got the device. It's the hacking tools for Bluetooth are in their infancy. So if you want to protect your smartphone, you can encrypt your data. You can have a remote wipe on it so that you can send a signal if it gets stolen. Like Find My iPhone has this to erase all the data. You can put a password on it when you boot it up, but there are several ways of tricking and getting past the iPhone password. There's a new one that came out just a few days ago. You hold down the power button and then you dial 911, and then you hang up, and you end up in a mode where you can connect it to a computer and steal the data without having unlocked it. There are often little tricks like that, which you can use to go past the login password. And your phone can have a location system. That's what Find My iPhone will do. It'll tell you where your phone is, but I don't really know what good this does. I mean, if you tell the cops, they will not kick down the door and steal it back for you. And it's not legal for you to go kick down the door and steal it back, so it's not entirely clear to me what good does it do you to know where your stolen phone is. But the feature is available. Yeah?
Yeah, one for Android too, like.
Yeah. They're available for Android. I
use it myself a lot, like if I leave my phone somewhere.
Yeah, that's what it's for. If you forget your phone, you can find it where it is.
Here.
But if somebody steals it, it's not exactly useful. Yeah.
And a long time ago, I had my first iPhone stolen. I know that even though they each have a personal identification number, each device,
Yeah.
Apple does not care. If
Right.
it gets stolen,
They don't
report
cancel.
it. They
Yeah.
do not, even someone re-registers that
Yes.
device.
That's why those things are really a risk. People steal iPhones and iPads all the time, and in Europe, this does not happen, because in Europe, when a phone is stolen, they cancel it like a credit card. You can't connect to the network, it's useless. So there's no market in stolen phones. And they should totally do that here, and there is a movement to start doing that here. It's a shame, we should have been doing it long ago. Every time your phone should get stolen, you should just call a number, that phone should be canceled, and then there'd be no motivation to steal it anymore.